A very warm welcome, everyone, to the Freefall workshop. My name is Anneloes Smitsman, and I am the founder and CEO of EARTHwise. And Erik-Jan, over to you. Quick intro.
My name is Erik-Jan, co-founder of the Thrive, executive coach and team coach. Nice to be here.
Wonderful. And Erik-Jan is calling from the Netherlands, and I'm calling from Mauritius, hence also our different backgrounds here. Freefall workshop. Funny anecdote about that first. So, as Erik-Jan and I were kind of exploring, how should we call this workshop, and also to know, why are we even creating this workshop? What we really noticed is, the world is in freefall in many ways, and these are very challenging times. We had already worked together, I think almost now for 2 years, where we've been supporting the application of living systems to thrivable leadership and thrivable organizations. So we've been exploring, we had, some wonderful experience of facilitating that in person in the Netherlands. And we really felt that this knowledge and these practices and these tools, we should make it much more accessible for a lot of people around the world, hence this online format. About a month ago, when I was kind of tuning in what would be a right title for this workshop, and I said to Erik-Jan, how about the freefall? And he said, yeah, that sounds good. But we didn't know then how accurate that title was going to be. And I've had quite a lot of my friends get in touch with me saying, oh, wow, we really are in freefall. And interesting, why did you choose, both choose that topic? So, we're going to go into that with all of you, and also ask you that as we explore this more deeply, for you to maybe recall a freefall moment. Now, of course, in this picture, what you're seeing is somebody is skydiving, and that's a fun experiment because you know that you're going to be diving with your parachute, right? And hopefully you've had some practice to know where the cord is. But what's going on right now in the world of colliding tipping points, climate tipping points, social tipping points, political polarization, unrest, divisions, lots of lies, rise of autocratic regimes, and so forth and so forth, we are risking conditions of free fall where we won't know where that parachute is, and where we may not have a fun and exciting experience, but something that we truly feel like it puts our world upside down. Have an experience of what that means, and recall a time in your life where you really felt like you don't know anymore what's right or left, and what's up and what's down. But that somehow, in some ways that you may not have known how, life has your back. And then in that moment when you had to let go of old perspective, old structures, old ways of being, you fell back and into yourself to find a new way through. So we just want to share very briefly also a free fall moment, each of us. So for me, this experience of free fall came when a couple of years ago I said yes to developing a game. A video game. And as a background of a sustainability scientist and an educator and a trainer and a coach for many years, but then somehow feeling this conviction of maybe we should really create a game that can empower younger generations. We should tokenize it as well. And why not create benevolent AGI prototypes with that and train benevolent AI systems? That was really my freefall moment. And I remember when I was talking to a friend of mine, and she was saying, Andrews, I think that everything you've been doing at EARTHwise can come together in this. And I literally felt like I was jumping out of a plane and I had no idea what I was making truly a commitment to. And I felt that rush of adrenaline and not knowing what my securities were going to be, how I was going to put this off. 2 years later now, we launched the MVP version in December, and it's been a free-fall experience ever since. But also through that, accessing enormous potentials of transformation. And so, Erik-Jan, what was your free-fall moment and experience?
Yeah, free fall. Free fall for me is loss of control. I like to have things under control, not in a micromanagement way, but in a I'll work twice as hard to make it happen kind of way. And some years ago, when I was still working for a different company, the results weren't that well, and I was compensating, working hard, fixing a lot of stuff, and also losing myself in that. I was totally switched on to make the difference. And it took a trip to the bush in the Okavango for me to wake up, literally, and to see that control is some kind of illusion, actually. When you're in nature, things are connected, things are moving. And of course, you have this power of intention, but trying to keep control of what's happening there, it's not possible. So I came back with a new insight, saying, hey, it's not about control, but it's about grip, it's about intention, it's about how to guide a living system. But yeah, this falling apart, basically, if you cannot control something, that still happens. But I always go back to that moment again, and I think, okay, so what is actually happening here? And I try to wake up much sooner and to get to this real perspective. And basically, that's also what I do with teams: slow down, to speed up, because I see a lot of teams running around trying to fix whatever the bottom line with quick fixes instead of looking the deeper change in the eyes. And that's why I'm also very happy with what we're doing here and in rethinking the way we do leadership, we do organizations. And looking at what we will cover today, we are already covering the freefall stuff, but also want to talk about the liminality that we're in. We know that we don't want to get stuck in the old, but the new is not there yet. So how do we get there? We want to revisit some of the old leadership patterns and why they are so stubborn to change. We want to talk about mechanistic views and the systemic barriers that prevent us from transforming, and then get into a new narrative and how we get there. So that's going to be our agenda for today. But first, something else.
Should we watch that little video? Which really gives what we have here is a collection of some key moments of different videos that explain the tipping points, that explain kind of what we call the VUCA times in which we are now, but also how this is exactly the time that we need to tap deeper into our humanity and that we can do that. So let's watch this. It's just for 5 minutes.
The important point to make here is that everything in the Earth system is connected. If one part of the climate system crosses its tipping point, then that might make it more likely for other parts of the system to also cross their critical threshold. So you can think of this in terms of dominoes. If you tip one of them over, then this might lead to a cascading effect.
We are very, very close to the tipping point. Are we concerned about fighting the climate crisis? Are we concerned about keeping the carbon in the forests? Or I don't care?
We will drill, baby, drill.
We're seeing bigger and bigger invoices being sent by the Earth system onto societies across the entire world in droughts, floods, heat waves, disease patterns, human-reinforced storms, scientifically attributed to human-caused climate change. That is why we need planetary boundaries. The planetary boundary framework that defines the 9 Earth system processes that regulates the stability and resilience of the entire planet. Climate, biodiversity, nitrogen, phosphorus, land, fresh water, air pollutants, and chemicals. That is the challenge. To summarize that, there is no 1.5 degrees Celsius delivery on the Paris Agreement by only phasing out fossil fuels. We also need to come back into the safe operating space of the nature-based biodiversity, all the planetary boundaries of nature. This means that science is clear. The window is rapidly closing. But there is still some light in the window. We actually have evidence that we've reached a pivotal point, not only in terms of risk, but also in terms of opportunity to transform the world towards a safe and just future for humanity. Linear change is no longer an option. The only option is exponential change. We know that the only currency that matters is speed and scale. We also need to become stewards of the entire planet.
From that deeper philosophical perspective, we could also say that life itself is a living system, and that the nature of life is that at a deeper level it is unified, and that the reality of life is its interdependence and is its interconnectedness. So every system, because it is whole, and it is a unique expression of that wholeness that we are, it has a systemic integrity. Now what it means is that when that system starts to grow and it starts to evolve and it starts to also diversify and it becomes more complex, and this is actually a universal principle itself, then we will start to see that at every stage of new growth and new development there are certain boundaries. And the boundaries is really the feedback system of the system itself to say, well, hold on, you know, if I'm going to stretch a little bit more here, I'm going to grow more complex or more diversified, but the rest of me can't catch up, then I might collapse. Yeah? So the systemic boundaries is really the intelligence, the wisdom of the system that allows it to come from its potentiality all the way into the full actualization.
We're all part of a universe of overlapping pain and sadness and joy and expectations and dreams and hopes and visions. And I see this world that we're in now forgetting that. And this kind of very foolish tribalism is starting to take us over, where we think we're all separate from each other.
A lot of our companies are pushed to their limits. And the question is, how are we going to address these frustrations, this crisis mode in our organizations? What woke me up personally is that a lot of companies actually are not that fit for human beings. People are in survival mode, they are not connected, not giving their best to become part of the solution. And therefore, sometimes unwillingly are becoming part of the problem. So how do you unleash this new energy, this innovative spirit, maybe even the winning spirit in your organization when you're facing difficult times?
It's a remarkable time to be alive, but it also carries great responsibility to act decisively. We have no time to lose.
We still have a chance. The window is still open for us to have a future for humanity. That, I think, is the beauty of where we are today.
The biggest disruption is yet to come, and that's becoming human-centric. And so when will you change your behavior? If we together look each other in the eyes at the end of this day and say, we're going to do this. Everybody in his own way, with his own responsibilities, feeling like, okay, now we're going to make the difference. Everybody on board for that?
Okay, so let's do that, right? So VUCA, we expressed that also in the emails that you received from us and on the website. We are in VUCA times: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So the question is, what do we do? As you saw in this video just now, this is the time to be decisive. But it's therefore very important that we understand on what impulses are we acting. And I am assuming here that many of you are leaders in your own way. Some of you are also leaders in your organizations. So the impulses that you're acting on, the examples that you're setting, the values that you're standing for or letting go in those moments create ripple effects, not just for your own teams, but for organizations around the world. Sadly, what we've been seeing in the last year is a major regression in sustainability commitments. And there are all kinds of reasons for that we won't be going into in depth right now. But that really brings to light in a time of crisis. We often refer to that also as the poly crisis, not just a sustainability crisis, a crisis also in human consciousness. And a perfect storm, we could say, that it becomes more and more important to really source deeply in your responsibility, the opportunities that you can set, how you become a space for possibilities, and how you become future creative. Erik-Jan.
Yeah, so for me, it's also exciting times. Of course, there's a lot of things going on that makes me sad as well. But it's also like a tipping point. There's something new coming, and we don't know yet how it's going to be. But yeah, we can be part of that solution. And at the same time, yeah, we see also in my practice that a lot of leaders are still shying away from making that real transformation. And of course, there are all kind of reasons for that. There are, of course, these short-time pressures where immediate results and EBITDA commitments are also important, and they take away a lot of energy from, I would say, the more future-oriented transformations that are also needed. Of course, there is this organizational inertia. I speak to a lot of leaders who say, "Yeah, but did you meet my organization?" And all the people that are in there, they seem not to want to change. I think they don't see it in the right way, but that's what we see, and that prevents them from really going deep. And there's also this familiar space where hierarchy and processes are, in a way, also giving some security to people, although they don't like it. And the fear of vulnerability. If you really want to go deep, if you really want to transform your organization, you also need to acknowledge that that you're not doing the right things now, and that also that's hard discussions. And we also create, I would say, the positive illusions that a lot of our leaders have. They say things like, I am capable, I am strong, I have things under control, I am popular, and we reinforce that it is important for our leaders to be as well. And that's not helping, because in a way, yeah, it's nice if leaders are smart, but they should also be able to gather people around and tap into the collective intelligence. Strong is also being vulnerable, being connecting people onto stuff. Popular, it's nice, but if that prevents you from making the real decision, it doesn't help. And then lastly, the mechanistic belief systems. So the fact that we look at organizations and countries and maybe the whole world as a mechanistic system, that also means that the way we want to solve problems is also very mechanistic, and that doesn't help when we talk about living systems. So when we look at this mechanistic view, you want to continue on that, Anneloes, or shall I?
Yeah. Okay. Go on, and then I'll add some things to that.
So for me, in working with Anneloes as well, I thought I was quite underway in looking to organizations as living systems, but still, we have been programmed in a mechanistic way, and we run also changes as if you create a manual and then people just start doing it. But organizations are living systems, countries are living systems. How do you do that? They create false sense of security in VUCA times, and a lot of leaders, I would say, benefit from that to create whatever they want to create based on the insecurity and fear of a lot of people. And that happens in countries, but it also happens in organizations, and not always intentionally, but it's also because of the fact that we think that way. And that is what I really loved also in our preparation, but also in the past 2 years, Anneloes, because you actually make it so simple that the way we are organized is also the problem.
Exactly.
So you can elaborate a little bit more on that, and
yes, I'd love to do. Yes, I'd love to do that. And a little bit of a background, of course, of mechanistic, this mechanistic worldview, what we see, it emerges from this industrialization. And this is when human beings very much saw themselves as superior to nature and looked for ways to extract value from nature in order to achieve their own goals, and wanted to get a control of their environment, of course, as well. But what we have seen now in the sustainability crisis, of course, is really emerging out of that belief system. And so what you're seeing here, and some of you have seen that also on a post that I shared on LinkedIn, I had the opportunity to take a really deep dive into what is now the science of living systems, what are the behaviors of living systems. And as Erik-Jan also said, societies are living systems, we are living systems. So it's actually really vital that we understand what is the difference between a mechanistic system, a machine-like system based on this kind of false belief system, as if we live in a dualized universe of separate parts and particles that is held together by immutable mechanistic laws. And it's a very old Newtonian belief. Thankfully, science has caught up since then. And, we know that that's not the case. But many people are still, and many organizations still operate accordingly. So what you're seeing here is the result of 5 years of PhD research, which I conducted from the Maastricht Sustainability Institute of Maastricht University, to take a deep dive into, what is the deeper architecture and design then of mechanistic systems, and what are the behaviors that are emerging from that, and what are the systemic barriers and systemic transformation barriers also that are resulting from that. And to be able to draw that up in these circles here, it's interesting how it actually was a very, very complex process to then distill it into here. And it was based on action research in one of the biggest financial institutions in Mauritius, a very mechanistic organization where I was asked to help them unlock their transformation potential, as well as research into schools and a big brand in tourism. So very different organizations, but interestingly, I came up when I was doing a deep dive evaluation with the people themselves and asked them, how are you feeling in this organization? Do you feel that you can implement also the new skills and awareness that you have? And this is when we started to map that out, really, really based on what people were experiencing themselves. And so when you then crystallize that further, what you can see then is that the desire to grow of an organization, the desire to grow of an organism, the desire to grow from all of us, there's nothing wrong with that desire to grow. And this is what I've noticed, that in the kind of sustainability fields where there's always this emphasis on degrowth, that can be really a hindrance in the way that we approach that, because growth itself is not the issue. It's how that growth gets expressed. So in a mechanistic system, kind of the first way in which that desire now gets channeled is through a dualistic mindset that's rooted in separation. Separation thinking in terms of win-lose competition, or us versus them, or you need to disconnect from something, or it can even be no pain, no gain, and you need to prioritize your work over your life, etc., etc. So it's rooted in that. And then what we see, what acts on those systems then is also this hierarchical governance that Erik-Jan also just mentioned. Mechanistic goals and drivers that are imposed, so they're not emergent, and mechanistic indicators for profit and progress that miss, of course, the most important indicators. This is like the planetary boundaries frameworks that we saw earlier, the feedback of living systems, and a very extractive, expansive growth model. And out of those systems, what we see then emerging is degenerative growth patterns. And we start to see actually the types of behaviors that are now really, really activated, what we see in nations, this disconnection, protectionism, domination, conflict, dualistic polarization, zero-sum game, competition, exclusivism. So all of those behaviors, if we try to just address those almost in these kind of rational models of, well, we shouldn't, that's totally ineffective. We have to address deeper in the structures of the system what's actually causing that. And what I've seen also, and it's been part of this research, a lot of, for example, the goal setting of sustainable development goals, the global goals, Important, yes, but it still did not address the deeper systemic barriers. And so then we are expecting systems to transform that themselves are caught up in these mechanistic paradigms. And so it's really important that we diagnose this in our organizations, also within ourselves, of course. And as part of that PhD research is also a diagnostic framework of mapping out then these systemic barriers in the organization, and then starting to see also how can we address this with specific transformation strategies. I won't be going into depth in those strategies here, but in all the work that we're also doing together with the Thrive, they're actually applying all of these research outcomes. So just to mention a few of those, what we see, of course, collaboration and coherence are blocked, interdependencies are harmed, and if we really understand that life itself as a complex system, the universe itself as a complex system is interdependent, that it is fundamental nature, then, so when these interdependencies are harmed, then it causes a lot of suffering. Reciprocity is blocked with living systems, distorted informational loops, which gives us this idea that we are creating progress and success and even profit, but the profit has an enormous ecological depth. And we are close to using now 1.7 planets in order to sustain our global, I wouldn't even call them needs, desires. Thrivability, learning and development blocks, empathy and love blocks, and and the one of the most important ones that was kind of surprising coming out of the research, I think is one of the most vital ones, is that we see a mechanistic systems that cause a lot of pain. These systems by design are incapable of learning from the pain that they cause. So what you see, people are also caught and feeling trapped in these mechanistic organizations. They get numb to the pain, looking away from the pain. And pain is an important messenger. And especially now, it's so important that we do listen to the feedback and what is really going on at a deeper level and make the commitment to affect the transformation there. So just want to touch very briefly then on some of the basic key qualities of understanding living systems. And for those of you here who are also working within organizational change, start to explore already how can we apply that to our organization. So the first thing is that, of course, living systems, and that includes you yourself, we have innate evolutionary capabilities. We're born with that. Isn't that incredible? And the three key evolutionary capabilities are the ability of self-creation, self-regulation, and adaptation. And these are from the foundation for evolutionary learning and development. And you see this as well, for example, if you or your organization is not able to self-regulate, your adaptive capability is immediately impacted. But we see also, for example, if a person is addicted, that self-regulation capacity is damaged or hindered or blocked. These are really vital and very important capabilities. And at a level of governance, for example, this is when you start to apply that principle in terms of, are people having decision rights? How is decision distributed over the organization? How does this work with choice making? In an organization, do I have to work very rigidly in the goals that I set, or is it okay to say, I'm really tired, I just really need a break, I just need to go within for a moment? Then systemic boundaries, and they're not barriers. This is such a vital difference. People often confuse the two. And so every living system has systemic boundaries that safeguard these interdependencies in service of the thrivability of the system as a whole. You yourself also have your boundaries, but in a growth mindset, extractive growth mindset, where it's believed that in order to be progressing and to be successful, we have to cross boundaries, we have to overcome boundaries. No, please don't. Listen to these boundaries and understand that growth is not just about quantitative. When we hit the limits of quantitative growth, this is when we start a qualitative, integral growth process that leads to deeper development, deepening awareness, deepening of consciousness. The other one is that freedom is ecosystemic. I know in our human societies, we like to create human rights charters. I actually started, my first degree was a master's in constitutional law and international relations. So I understand about law. But when I, as a system scientist, really looked at, but how is freedom, an emergent quality of a living system? Then you could see that it is a direct result of the capacities of the system, and therefore the capacities to balance, to regulate, to tune, adapt activities, resources, and processes as a whole. So it's very, very dynamic. And why this matters is that we may have human rights, we may have court systems to try to protect it, but if we are trapped in systems that are fundamentally unfree and create only more traps and more unfreedom, then those rights don't mean much. So it's time that we start to think as societies, how can we to really honor that innate freedom ecosystemically? And then the other one is one of my favorites, is that future potentials serve as evolutionary attractors. So that means that within us already here right now are futures, the potentials of new emerging futures. And this is why it's so important that we engage those, because if we engage in this future possibility of a thrivable world, of a regenerative society, of a humanity that's growing wise and mature, then we're also engaging those future possibilities as evolutionary attractors. And I think that's especially now so important because it helps us also have a shared vision. But even more fundamentally, and sometimes people don't know this about living systems are actually imaginal systems. And they use these futures and these evolutionary attractors for renewal and for transformation. So there is more to envisioning and dreaming that people may realize. It's not just a mental activity. It's also how a living system, including ourselves and animals, dream too, and nature also, how it renews and how a system resets itself from higher orders of possibility. And that means that living systems are actually thrivable by design. So we can finally come to some kind of definition of thrivability and why we use that instead of sustainability. And it's our innate ability to develop our capacities and actualize our potentials in ways that are generative, life-affirming, and future creative. So Erik-Jan, over to you.
Yeah, so we were talking about living transformation, and then you told me that you used this cartoon in your
Yes.
your presentation.
In the defense, in the dissertation defense,
So of course, we can fight the dragon, or we can love the dragon, and change our perception, change our leadership, and change the way we dream and we envision the future and create it together. And of course that needs leadership. And we thought about a few things on leadership, and when are you a thrivability leader? There's a lot here, and we will address them a little bit more. But it is about embracing the uncertainty. It's about prioritization. It's about core values, interconnectedness, win-win, being a steward, being sparking, and learn from pain. And as we go through them, I think it's also, if you read them, you'll. I go like, oh yeah, okay, makes sense. But I think there's a whole story behind every one of them, and also maybe a deeper transformation that you're in, or that you already did, or maybe that you're in the beginning of doing. And the first one about the embrace uncertainty. If there is a lot of uncertainty, we all have a response in how we deal with uncertainty, and you only know how you do that. But the question is, are we able to hit the pause button and think, hey, are there also other ways of reacting to this uncertainty? If we are not fully aware of what the future looks like and what we have to do to get there, and you want to really use whatever is in you, in your team, or even in the broader community to unleash that, that requires a total different kind of leadership, where you actually connect people and use the collective intelligence. That's why we say with humility, because somebody needs to take that initiative, but it's not about you, it's about doing it together. But it's also about resilience, that if it doesn't work, that we don't stop, but we go on. It's about finding what we need to find, and when we've found it, we might need to change it again. So keep going. And when it comes to prioritize what matters, I think we all have our things where we say, this is really important, this is something I'm standing up for. But yeah, what happens if that somehow is contrary to what makes you popular in a decision, or That's the deeper, I would say, human need to that people actually like you, or that you want to be accepted. So can you prioritize against that? Also in your company, but also in the broader community. So what do you really stand up for? And what are the, can you again, in those defining moments, make a different choice and do what you feel is good? If you uphold your core values, it is about inclusiveness. It's about holding your head up high, compassion, and even love in every action. Love is a strong word. We don't always use it in the business context, but more and more we see that it actually is used because it's a really good word. And we need it as human beings, and it's what makes you feel alive. So how do you do that as a leader? How do you love people in the good way? The interconnectedness has a lot to do with how you look at systems and how you I would say design your system for success, or at least the things you want to do as a company or as an organization. And how do you use the diversity? How do you create coherence? How do you make sure that people actually do what they need to do instead of what they've been told? So don't limit people, but help them to make a difference based on who they are. And there's also complexity. And I think what happens a lot in companies these days is everything is complex. No, not everything is complex, but the complex things you need to organize in a different way. There are also very complicated things, or maybe difficult things, and you can still deal with them in the way we are dealing with them now. But the real complex things, we need this leadership skill really badly. A win-win instead of zero-sum thinking, the and thinking. How do you create best for both worlds? Yeah, that's how can you lead in that? That says a lot about how you do dialoguing. How do you make the dialogues meaningful instead of trying to win or trying to be the best? Or so how does that work with you? I like to win, especially in sports, but therefore also otherwise. Yeah, for me that's also sometimes I need to hit the pause button and say, hey, is there a third option here? Act as a steward. More and more we like to put a seat at the table of future generations, but also think about leadership in a way that we say, hey, leadership is also stewardship. And most of the people that are in leadership are leading a company or a country, or that is not theirs. By nature, leadership is also stewardship. So you've been given a responsibility. How do you do that? And how do you do that in a way that is sustainable for people, for humanity, but also for a thriving world, the planet? Ignite the spark. I often say, are you able to breathe life into your company or your community? Because it takes a spark to get a fire going. This is, I think, a really important thing for creating thrivability. The energy needs to be sparked. It's already there, but we often forget it, that it's there. And then the last one I really learned from Anneloes as well. I often ask leaders what their relationship with pain is, and then they look at me in a weird way. But I think we've promoted a lot of leaders that have a very high pain tolerance. They can work more hours than anybody. They can they even work when they are ill. So they don't feel their own pain, and therefore also don't have a lot of empathy for the pain of the organization or the people living there. If I summarize the previous slide, you discussed Anneloes. You said me a mechanistic system doesn't have brakes, and it just goes on, and growth is the only option. So it needs to get better and better and better, and there's no brake. And there's a lot of signals in an organization that people are trying to find the brake, but there's no brake. So how do you find it? I think as a thrivability leader, you also need to be more sensible of the feedback loops that are there, but we don't listen to them to become a better leader.
Thank you. Yes, I fully agree. And I'd love to add a few things to that, if that's all right. Just unpack it, because there's so many great points you just made. I want to unpack a little bit about this complexity, this word complexity, because it's so often used by people and not understood. So from a systems science perspective, complexity, a complex system means that there are many interdependencies, and so it has to do with also the structure of the interconnections of a system. And complexity very often gets confused with complicatedness or complications. Sometimes people say, oh, don't be so complex, what they actually mean, don't be so complicated. But when you don't understand complexity, life becomes very complicated. But when complexity works well, as it should, it's beautiful. And as an example, think of an orchestra, so many different instruments playing together. And so it's very complex. The music is complex, but you will, when it really works, when it's coherent, you'll experience it as beauty, as something that is so rich. A beautiful meal that's been made with lots of different herbs and flavors and a nice balance between the different tastes there. It's complex. But when you take that bite, it just feels so good. Love itself is complex, but that's also the depth. So life is complex, but life is not complicated. It's humans that make, because we are not working with the complexity of life, and that's because we try to compartmentalize things, fragment things, break things apart, because we want to control it and impose our own goals onto it. Then complexity kind of pushes back. But it's our own complications and that we are adding to this. So I just wanted to add that. And also on the win-win solutions, indeed, as you were saying, Erik-Jan, include the planet in that. So also when we're feeling like winning is fun, of course. And there's nothing wrong with the winning. What's wrong is with when you think that means someone has to lose for you to win. So win-win is also about saying, yeah, it's fun. Let's win this kind of race towards maturation as a species, and let the planet win too. So it's we win, the planet wins, future generations win. And when you do that, your focus and your motivation, and what also gives tremendous energy, becomes how can we create maximum goodness together? And then it shifts away to how do we minimize harm? And this is also where we're going for thrivability as a higher benchmark than just sustainability. Yeah? If you have a sustainable relationship or sustainable marriage, there's probably not a lot of joy in it. So we want to have a thrivable relationship. So the ability to thrive, thrivability is all about that. Includes not just sustainability, not just that something is regenerative, but also the element of joy and how we are together creating then new futures. So I would love to invite you all here to continue this journey with us. We've given you a lot to think about and to apply and to explore in this very short hour. But we're going to be unpacking this in our upcoming online course, which involves over 4 modules over 4 weeks with a beautifully designed course portal as well, so that everything is recording, so you can revisit that. Lots of practical exercises as well and different frameworks. And in order to give you a really systemic way of going about that, of developing our thrivability leadership, but also for those of you, for example, who may not be part of a big organization, but you may be hired as a coach or as a trainer, as a consultant to support organizations in their transformation. This is really a wonderful course to go through that, which gives you all the foundations. And that is why, as a foundational course, we've kind of distributed that training over 4 modules of governance, culture, capabilities, and systems. Because what we've noticed is that quite often when there are leadership trainings within organization, is that a trainer gets hired only for one block. And we had that interesting conversation, right, Erik-Jan and I, and with Boudewijn, who was here too, that I tend to be getting hired on the governance side. Corporate governance is also part of my skill set. And, you were mentioning you often get hired on the team's development and the leadership development. That what you are seeing is that then there is a certain limit to that transformation potential. And that we then notice that the transformation takes place to a certain degree, but it doesn't get through the whole organization. And this is also where when EARTHwise and when the Thrive, when we put that together, our different skills and qualities, and we said, that's really interesting. We each get hired often for different parts, but it's the whole that matters. And if we want to have the real transition from unsustainable towards sustainability, regeneration, ultimately being a thrivable organization, and your qualities as a leader as well to be able to facilitate that change process, then we need to have this understanding and the skill set to work in all of those areas. We'll give you some frameworks also. Some of you may have already done the Thrivability Scan as well. In that scan, you also can get a good assessment of where am I at as a leader, but also within the organizations that either I'm part of or maybe working with. So in the governance, we're going to really look in a whole new way about governance, also based on the science and praxis of living systems, how to shift that, how to facilitate this collective intelligence and ignite it as well and help align that. And culture, of course, very important to nurture that collective well-being. And that's also by really addressing the shift in mindsets and heart sets, developing that integral awareness and capabilities, fostering that diversity and inclusive collaboration. And that brings us then also to how do we then develop these future creative evolutionary capabilities that we saw earlier in living systems, and transition them from controlling the past to really building a proactive learning organization. And if you want to be a learning organization, then of course, and that's the next module, you need to understand what are the kind of systems in place. Because if you have a mechanistic system at the core in the way that information is distributed and created, so if that's really mechanistic and it is then controlled to a very much a hierarchical top-down governance, you may have been training all these wonderful evolutionary capabilities and transformative leadership and, a culture that understands innovation. But if the governance and the systems are mechanistic, it's not going to work. In fact, what I've seen in the organizations that I've worked with is that dissonance creates even more pain. Then people are feeling that they are not capable of truly applying the awareness that they've gained in their organization in a way that now their consciousness has expanded, their understanding of what is really important has expanded, and then they feel even more trapped. So it's really important when we're working with our transformational change of organizations, but also ourselves, of course, that we look at all of those 4 aspects here. And then also, design, therefore, it's also a design question, because a lot of what you're looking at in our societies, they're unsustainable by design. So we can create better designs, and we can apply this understanding of living systems for the design also of living organizations. And again, would you like to add something to that?
It's an invitation to think with each other. I would say also to really fundamentally rethink how we lead and how we do organize. It's not about creating new organizations, but how do we organize for success and goodness as well. And so it's also reflecting on what kind of organization do you want to be, what is the new normal, if you really embrace some of these living system perspectives. And as you might have seen over the last hour, Anneloes and myself are quite different. So we bring 2 worlds together, and that's not always easy, but it's always fun because something happens. When it comes to the more holistic way of looking at things, at life, etc., but also looking at where we are now with organizations and countries. And how do we bridge that? I think there will be a lot in those sessions where we also discuss the tensions and the questions we have, and also want to discuss those with you, and also with the questions you have looking at your own organization. And we've prepared a lot of, I would say, also more practical things on how you can approach these things. So I think that's going to be quite a ride.
Looking forward to it very much. And each module will be 2.5 hours. So it also includes small working groups, breakout groups, practices, and Q&A as well, so that we can have these deeper conversations. And it unfolds through weekly sessions. It starts on the 19th of March. We have, of course, also an early bird, especially for everyone who's coming here today. So before the 22nd of February, if you want to join, please benefit from that early bird 30% off. And everything is recorded as well. So you have continuous access also to all of the resources. But this, I would say, this really brings together kind of the best of, from the Thrive and from EARTHwise. If we're looking at our collective intelligence of the two organizations coming together, it's like super packed, but insight, wisdoms, tools, practices, but it really, condenses that of, each of our organizations in decades of experience in the field of transformational change and leaderships.